things you own end up owning you.
What's going on, good people? Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Denise Minger. Denise has been involved in the health and nutrition world for a pretty long time. Denise wrote an article that went viral many years ago that debunked the controversial book, The China Study. From there, she went on to continue her path of critiquing diet and nutrition ideologies, but then she just kind of went off the map. Well, it turns out that she recently had a transformation in her life through using plant medicines. And so we sat down for a chat to talk about how it all went down. I hope you enjoy this one, and thanks for listening. I've been, following your work for a long time. You seem to have gone through like all the different stages of dieting and nutrition advice and all that kind of stuff. And when you kind of first talked about your big article that kind of made you, I guess, semi-internet kind of famous, right? That the debunking the China study. You kind of became the person that like all the paleo people were like, yes, look, she's right. Like, that's my girl, right? Like, look at this. And then out of nowhere, you kind of switched over to talking about like the rice diet and eating a bunch of sugar and like, maybe that's not bad. And then all those people were like, no, no, and it just has been this like, now there's like a new wave of people coming into, like the carnivore people, and then there's the vegan people that, there's new ones, there's old ones, but they come and go. And, originally I wanted to talk to you about that. But you told me that you've been, and you also kind of been out of the spotlight for a while too. And you told me that you've been doing some other stuff. So, what have you been up to?
So it's a great way to start this. So scrolling back, like when I was 22, I think that's when I started my blog when I was 23. So this is like over a decade ago at this point. At the time, I was coming out of my own vegan experience, and I had a lot of ex-vegan rage. I was kind of fueling a lot of the stuff I was doing. Went in with a really, strong conviction just to like demolish the ideologies that I'd seen hurting people, right? Because like people going vegan, the amount of censorship and the information people could access about why am I not feeling good? Oh, you're just detoxing. It was all very upsetting. Exactly.
If you lose your period, it'll come back. You don't need it. It's detox right?
You're clean now. Yeah, terrible, right?
Oh, man.
So at the time I had, I started my blog, and a lot of people don't know this, but I got hit by a car when I was 22. I had a near-death experience. While I was recovering from that, I had the idea to start this blog. Like, it came to me, I was like half asleep one day. I was like, oh, blog idea. I wrote it down on a little piece of paper. And then about a year later, I realized it was time to actually start that blog. And so at the time, I was like living off pain and suffering money from this car accident that I was in. People always ask like, who funded your China study thing? And it was like, well, it was the insurance company of the woman who hit me.
There we go.
Right. But yeah, so I started the China study, just with this idea of I started critiquing the China study with this idea of doing it for personal fulfillment. I didn't expect anyone to read it. And then of course it blew up, and I was wholly unprepared for a career to start at that point, especially in nutrition. I had been working as an after school teacher, at a Catholic school. I'm not Catholic, so it was this thing. I'm half Jewish. It was I had an interesting assortment of gigs that were keeping me
cool.
That's cool. Right. But then this thing happens, and I got a book deal with Mark Sisson, and it people were asking me to speak at conferences, and I had to very quickly adopt this identity of debunker, science minded, truth seeking, which is definitely part of my identity, but it got so focused in the nutrition sphere. And so I kept going with the kind of anti-vegan sentiment for a while. Ran out of juice, right? My ex-vegan rage, I used it up.
Calm down a little bit.
And then I was like, well, God, these paleo people are just kind of full of shit sometimes. And so I switched over to finding the flaws in the next system. And so this is what I did, right? And then low carb, I started working with people one-on-one. I kept getting women especially coming who are like, I've been doing low carb and like I'm having these thyroid problems, my hair is falling out, but everyone just says, keep doing it.
Detox.
And detox, again, it's the same framework, right?
The same framework, yeah, just different words and different ideology, yeah.
Right. It's like when you first enter a scene, you don't notice those flaws initially. You're like, wow, these people seem to be doing really well. Everyone has these success stories.
Yeah. Well, also, it's always like, oh, these people that have been on this diet for 4 months are doing so well, right? And it's like, you don't find a lot of those people that like, oh, I've been carnivore for 10 years straight, right? There's like, handful of people in the world that have been doing these crazy diets that have actually stuck to them without like bullshitting and lying to people too. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of those fakers too.
Oh, I know that. Yes. That was the other thing too, working behind the scenes and getting to talk to people one-on-one. It's like, I won't throw anyone under the bus, but it's like you go to a conference as a presenter, you get to talk to the other presenters. They're giving keto presentations while talking about the problems like behind the scenes that they're having on the diet that they're promoting. It's just, it gets painful after a while because you get disillusioned enough times and you start realizing that there's no holy grail here. And that's kind of where I arrived at diet-wise. I think there's people who do fine on vegan. I think there's people who do fine on carnivore. I think those are very small ends of a bell curve that, most people do better somewhere in the middle. And I also believe that we're almost using diet in the same like pill-like mentality that we're like criticizing the pharmaceutical industry for doing. Like here, just do this one thing to your body. You're going to be healed. You're going to be psychologically well. You're going to be physically well. And this is kind of why I dropped off the radar. And this is the first time I've talked about this, I think, in any podcast and possibly like even online.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no, this is great. Honestly, like when you messaged me about this, doing this podcast, I was having like an adult meltdown in a hotel in Detroit. Like I was literally like, oh my God, I need to be.
Oh no. And in Detroit, that's not the most beautiful place to have a meltdown at. I've been there.
It was. I was visiting some family that I hadn't seen in a while.
No offense to all you people that live in Detroit. There are great spots over there. I'm just saying.
I'll tell you, it was on day 6 of this road trip. We drove 6,000 miles in 8 days.
Oh,
so it was a lot of driving.
That'll wear you out too. That in itself can give you a meltdown too.
And half of it was like through the South, and like I don't do well. Everything's fine. I can't even eat there. Anyway, sorry anyone who's living in any of these areas. There's beautiful spots.
There's great spots, but there's also a lot of shitty spots too. Yeah, and I've been there too. I've lived in Ohio and I've been to Michigan and Indiana and Kentucky, and I visited the whole thing. And yeah, there's a lot of good spots, but there's a lot of places where it's like, yeah, all you got to eat there is pickle and fucking Oreos or whatever, right? Pretty much that's it.
I lived on like convenience store pickles and jerky.
See, there you go.
Like the pickle was like a luxury. I was like, oh my God, it's a vegetable.
Oh, it's the best pickle. So the spicy ones, right? Like, oh man, these ones are fancy. The spicy ones here.
You got it. Right. Anyway, so I was having this like almost existential crisis. Like I really just want to talk about the past year that I've been going through, because it's been such a deviation from what I've presented myself online as like publicly. And so then I like was melting down in this hotel room. I was really upset because like I was like hungry. Wendy's had just closed. I just wanted a fucking chicken salad like from Wendy's. It wasn't even that. I was having a bad day. And then I opened my email and you're like, oh, I have no idea who you are, right? I haven't checked my email in a while. Email from you, like podcast invite. I'm like, oh my God, saving grace. Thank you for inviting me on.
The forces brought us together.
It did. Awesome. It's funny how that works. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was a very long tangent.
No, we got all the day in the world. Yeah.
Coming back to I went very much underground after I wrote that like in defense of low fat post. Part of it was. So I wrote this post, right? And it was for me just like a curiosity deep dive into a lot of research that had been overlooked, and that contradicted a lot of our current beliefs about what does sugar do, how like what causes diabetes, what can cure diabetes, and so it was just interesting to me. And the amount of response I got from that was, I don't want to say overwhelming, but it was intriguing to me how many people wanted to suddenly adjust their diet based on the stuff I was writing, or wanted to throw out something that was working for them to try something different.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'll be totally transparent here. The way I eat is based on how I feel when the food's in my body. If I find a scientific paper saying like X is good for you, but like I don't feel good eating it, I'm not going to change things based on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a way that we've been using diet to bypass a lot of different types of other healing, I guess you could say, in search of finding the sense of fulfillment. And
Mm-hmm.
I started feeling really out of sync with the way I was working online and publicly, and like what I actually am behind the scenes, which is I very much live my life via intuition and like esoteric shit. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't follow the science to such an obsessive degree that I change my path according to that.
Yeah.
And I felt like over time I was kind of taking on this identity as like,
Yeah,
this is
like
what
I'm
the science.
Denise, the ancestors 5,000 years ago did this, so this is what I do, and that's what I
Exactly.
have to do. And if I have some ice cream, it was, it was just a cheat, and I will get back to being, me, the ancestral person and it's just like, it's this never ending kind of roller
It
coaster
never
ride.
ends. It
Yeah.
never ends. And it's so often filling some kind of like I don't want to say void, but there's definitely like a piece that people are searching for. And a lot of times, we're disconnected from any type of cohesive spirituality within most Western culture. A lot of people aren't religious. I'm not religious, but we have like this thing that we're looking for, and it's often just to find satisfaction in our lives and contentment, not even just happiness, but a sense of like being at peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people jump from diet to diet looking for that.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll get it for a little bit. Like when I went raw vegan, I felt better than I'd ever felt
Mm-hmm.
my whole life for 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you chase that high.
Been there, done that
afterwards.
too. Yeah. And also you're meeting a lot of like-minded people, right? So that, that person is doing that and you're doing this diet. So it's like, it's great, and then like we said, then you meet other people that have been doing this diet for 3 months and they all feel great. So you're thinking, well, fuck,
Yeah.
I'm on the right track here. I'm doing awesome because they feel great. I feel great. We're all feeling great. And then you start going to conferences and then you start selling supplements that go together with your, ideology there. And it just keeps going.
It keeps going. And then you get stuck there, right? Because
Yes.
you
But
built
then,
your empire
yes,
on it, right?
yes, then you're that guy or
Then
girl.
you're that,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. So it's I felt grateful that I didn't attach to like a single ideology, because I think that kept me sane, and it
Mm-hmm.
kept me from like building like a financial foundation on like my belief system, which I think it's really tricky for people, because once you do that, then you have people who can never really fully back out of the things they've been promoting, even if it starts not working.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of my trajectory, and then so I wrote the low fat post out of
Mm-hmm.
curiosity. People have been almost definitely weekly emailing me asking for like, where's part 2? And every time I've sat down to work on it, I'm just like, my heart is not in this anymore. My heart is not in this.
That's
And
fine. But overall, was the response good or massively positive? Did you have negative responses too? What's the
it was a mix. It was
ratio?
a
Mix?
mix.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised at how many people responded well to it, even from kind of hardcore low carb camps. I think the backlash I did get was from people who are really attached to like the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity and diabetes. It's like, because that's a pretty big nail in the coffin for that. But at the same time, I think there's an argument that can be made that you go on either end of the macronutrient extremes and you're going to find therapeutic value there.
Mm-hmm.
And which isn't to say that if you're eating closer to the middle that you can't also be healthy, but like you get here and things behave differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people could come to terms with that being a reality.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the most part, people who are low carb are still going to be like, well, this is easier for me. The food tastes better. I don't want to go back to that, like, fruit, sugar and all that, which is fine too. I'm totally let people do what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Individual sovereignty. I don't care what someone does to their body as long as it doesn't affect mine. Yeah, so it was a good response. And
so not a lot of like triggered paleo people emailing you about it, like, you're wrong. Yeah, maybe a few. Not to throw anybody specific under the bus, just curious.
Yeah, there's a few, but it's mostly it's kind of the same people who just like to, I think they got a lot of anger themselves, maybe their own
Yeah,
ex, whatever rage that they're still trying to get
exactly.
out.
Yeah.
And when you're a public figure, people will just use you as a projection screen.
They
You just
love
have to
doing
come to
that, don't
terms
they?
with
It's
that.
so easy to just point your finger and just say, "Look, she's
Yeah.
wrong now."
Oh, like I'm angry. I feel bad about something. Here's a person on the internet. I'm behind my keyboard. I can see whatever I want.
Yeah, no, you
Yeah.
don't have a, you don't have your face anywhere, so nobody knows who you are, so you can say whatever the fuck you want. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty standard for the internet. So,
Some things never change, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
hmm So you went from that, and so, but what was was there a moment that you kind of were like, yeah, I think I'm over this diet bullshit, and I'm just gonna follow what feels good and do what feels right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was so right around when COVID was like hitting headlines and everyone was like, it's overblown. This isn't going to become anything.
hmm
So maybe around March of last year, right?
15 days to slow the curve, and then now I'm here hiding from my anal swabs over here in my house. Like, leave me alone, Bill
Leave me
Gates.
alone, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it was. I want to say it was around that time. My 33rd birthday was approaching. So my birthday is May 4th, so it was like probably early March of last year,
Mhm.
and I had this moment of realizing how discontent I was with my life. And I'd been on this kind of path, right? Like
Mhm.
career kind of landed in my lap. I never would have chosen nutrition if it had been up to me. It kind of like was this thing, I got hit by the car, I was recovering from it, opportunities were unfolding, and I felt very lucky that I had had like an entry point into a career field without, listen, I didn't even graduate college. I left college one credit short, one French class short of graduating. Like
Oh
most,
no, and fucking French. Oh, that's embarrassing.
it's very embarrassing, right?
Just
But
kidding.
I mean, it's like I didn't have like a strong path that I had formed for myself,
Yeah,
in my early
something that you
20s.
just
So
kind of
this,
jumped into and then kept going
yeah,
with it.
and it just felt like it was this gift, right? And so I
hmm
was like, well, I have to keep going with this. It's like a once in a lifetime thing. How could that ever happen again? Um, so I got fixated on needing to do nutrition, and I just kind of like, you know,
hmm
put my mind on that. But anyway, so around late in my 30s, I started thinking, wow, this is really not fulfilling. Like it's taking an incredible amount of force just to get myself to write blog posts. There's very little joy in it. Reading scientific papers all day, I can do that for like my day job, but it's not something that is like nourishing me on like a deeper level.
hmm
So a few months before my birthday, I woke up one day and I was like, I need to do ayahuasca.
Wow, so it just hit you like that?
Just
Yeah.
like that. Just
But you
like
didn't
that.
have like, have you watched the typical like Netflix documentaries, or
No.
I don't know, followed who's like, I don't, Joe Rogan, I guess, and Aubrey
Oh,
Marcus, those
sure.
sort of guys, right? That talk about it all the time. So
Right,
you've
right.
heard about it, right? You've known about it and all
It's on
that.
my radar. It was
Okay.
on my radar. And the year before, I had stayed in California with a friend, kind of helping him with his business. And he had a friend who'd been to like Peru or somewhere in South America like 7 times, right, to
Yeah,
do the
Costa Rica
ayahuasca
or
retreat.
Peru seems to be the big two spots. Yeah,
Yeah, you go down there, you come
hmm
back all like shiny-eyed, like, oh my
yeah.
God, I've
Take a
changed.
flowers
Sleep in the
bath.
bucket.
Ah,
Right,
yes.
exactly, right. And I was like, I'm gonna go throw up in a jungle. Like that didn't sound. That's not very Denise friendly. I don't like that. So I had like this gut level aversion to the thought of doing that when I first came on my radar.
hmm
And I should also mention, like, I was like dare poster child growing up. Like I didn't drink. Like I've never been like an alcohol person. Didn't even really do weed.
hmm
I wasn't into mind altering substances, and I had this stubbornness about like if there's a way to access these different parts of your mind, I want to learn how to do it without needing an external crutch.
Sure.
So I had a stubbornness about it.
hmm
So I'd never expected anything like that to have a strong pull for me. Nevertheless, I woke up. It's truly just a one day I woke up and ayahuasca. It was like there's something there. I don't know what it is. And of course, again, COVID was just beginning, and so there were travel restrictions that were starting to get in
Yeah.
place. Um, I didn't have like a lot of money to blow on going to like a full on retreat and stuff. But I knew I needed to do this. Like for whatever reason, there was something there. So
hmm
I Googled you know, ayahuasca. I was living in Seattle at the time. I was like ayahuasca, Pacific Northwest, or, you know, whatever combination. And I found a very small retreat center that was in my home state, in my state of Washington, just like an hour and a half north of Seattle. And I
Wow.
was like,
Wow, these
oh,
spots
man,
been popping up. There's one in Kentucky that like everybody's talking about. I don't know if you've heard of that one. And like, but like, you know, I'm like, of Kentucky, of all fucking places to have ayahuasca, you know, retreats. It's pretty interesting.
who knows, right? Yeah, I think I've heard of that one. There's that one in Florida, Soul Quest. I don't know which
Yeah,
one is,
yeah.
or yeah, they're like popping up everywhere. And
Hmm.
you know, there's some controversy about whether, you know, we're like doing it right here in America, because a lot of
Sure.
the times it's not people who come from a lineage of shamans who've learned how to do this. It's like someone who, you know, white dude who, like, you know, went down to South America
Yeah, I
for a
bought
while.
this on
Yeah.
eBay. Let's do this shit,
Bought
right?
this on eBay,
Yeah.
right? So there's always that. There's some controversy, but where I was at, I was like, dude, I just need to do this. Like,
Okay.
I'm gonna trust it. Most of my best decisions in life have come from like I don't know why I have to do
That's
this, but I have to do
impressive
it.
because, you know, not everybody can just jump into that like that, you know, not I don't know. Very few people would just kind of go, "All right, I'm doing this. I'm just going to let go and trust." So,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So you just signed up and went to the retreat?
I signed up. So I signed up, and I'll say to you, I mean, I think you do have to get pushed to a certain point in life where you feel like you've exhausted all your options.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I won't say I was depressed at this point, this juncture in life, but like I was at this state of like I felt trapped in my own mind.
Yeah.
It's almost like you could feel like the neural pathways had gotten so deeply grooved that I was just like,
Hmm.
just felt like being at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, being like, how the fuck do I get back up to the top? Like I'm down, like I don't, like I know there's more
Hmm.
on either side of this, but I can't access it. And so I think those things kind of pieced together, and I was just like, for whatever reason, this thing's calling me. So yeah, I signed up for it.
Hmm.
I went. Actually, the first ceremonies got canceled because of COVID, so that blew
Oh.
up during this whole process. Like, damn it! And ended up going at the end of May. Most life-changing thing I've ever done. Like,
Wow.
it was like, have you ever watched a movie where it's like it starts with like one plot, you think you know how the movie's going, and there's like some like crazy like M. Night Shyamalan like twist where it's like,
Yeah.
"Fuck, this isn't what that movie's
Oh,
about
he
at
was
all."
dead the whole time.
He
He
was
was
dead
just
the
a
whole time.
ghost. Yes.
Exactly, right. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But this is how I felt like this curvature in my life went. It's like I had this belief about who I was, what I was doing, what my relationships were.
Hmm.
I went to two ayahuasca ceremonies, and the place I went to is like two ceremonies consecutive, and then you go home.
Hmm.
So I went to two. There's no way to put any of it into words, right? It's like I went with the intention of show me what I am,
Hmm.
and it showed me every area of life that I was out of alignment, which
Okay.
was a lot. Which was a lot. And most importantly, it forced me to receive my own love, which I had so much resistance to doing.
Hmm.
And the funny part is, so I went kind of expecting to work through a few things in my life that were kind of hanging over my head. One was that a very dear person to me had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I was like, I need to process this more. Like that was my thought going in.
Hmm.
The other one was I had had a breakup a few years prior that was still kind of haunting me because it was just unresolved, sticky, a lot of like, it just didn't feel closed.
Sure.
And so I expected to work through that too. Rookie mistake number one. You never go with an expectation.
You can't have
what's gonna come.
expectations, right?
You can't have expectations. So often what we think of as our problems are that's not actually the issue, right? It's like
Yes.
it's like, well, this nail is all fucked up, so let's keep like,
Yes.
you know,
Or
hammering it,
you
and
think
then
you know that it's this one nail, even though you
you
haven't
think
looked at it, right? You just think, oh,
exactly.
it's that one, but then you're like, oh shit, there's all these other nails that I haven't even thought about, right?
There's all these other nails, and then you kind of go under the knots in your psyche that have populated upward to cause the problem.
Hmm.
And you realize you have to peel back so much more before you can even make changes at this level.
Hmm.
So yeah, none of the things I thought were going to come up came up.
Hmm.
And what instead I came back with was this sense of clarity about what it feels like to be on the right path, like internally, like in my body, like what that actually feels like. It was very much an embodiment experience. Like I will say, like up until that point, my experience of spirituality and has always been a really big part of my life. Like I've always been interested in like what happens after death, like different esoteric systems. Before I had my nutrition blog, I had an astrology website that I used to like, because I was right. And I've always been interested in those kinds of systems, but they were always up here. It was like I was just hoarding knowledge. It's like I just have to learn a little bit more, have to figure this out. It was just thinky. You go to ayahuasca and it just like opens this gateway that just pours it into your body. And it is an amazing experience, absolutely amazing experience. So I went to these 2 ceremonies in May, just buzzing for like the next few months. Became probably a little evangelical about it. Everyone who I talked to, oh my God, you did ayahuasca.
Yeah, like every first timer does, yeah.
Every time, right. Almost like when you go raw vegan, you're like, oh my God,
oh
you have
my
to do
God.
this. Nothing but feels amazing. So there's clearly some patterns I've had in my life with jumping into things and getting very excited and then maybe pushing them too far.
Sure.
So next month, June was back, like June came. Right, May passed. I was like integrating everything, and I was like, "Oh my God, I have to go back." And I had like another one of those. Woke up, and I was like, and I knew which days I needed to go. It was this weird, like I have to go to this particular ceremony. I should also mention I didn't have a way of getting up there. Didn't have a car. The first time I carpooled with somebody. This time I was like, I signed up without having any means of transportation to get up there, and I just knew that I needed to be at these specific ceremonies. So I was like, God, I was looking at my options for transportation. And then I went on the ayahuasca subreddit.
Where all the best information is found.
Obviously the best information. And there's a post at the top post on the subreddit was someone who said, has anyone gone to the name of the very small retreat center that I was going to? I just signed up for the ceremony dates of XYZ, which were the same dates I was going up. And so somebody looking for information who had signed up for the exact same ceremony that I was going to, which is capped at 10 people. So it's like, this is a very small facility. Very few people know about it. And so I was like, oh my God, I need to get a ride with this person, right? So I like messaged this person on Reddit. Long story short, we carpooled up, ended up falling in love, and moved to Phoenix together, which is where I am now.
Oh, so that's the story.
So you have some stuff like that happens, and then now I'm looking back on that, and I think that's why I like had to go to that one too, because it was the only way. Because he lived in Portland, I was in Seattle. Like there was no way we could have otherwise connected. So sometimes it's funny how that works.
Of course.
But anyway, I need to continue explaining my process with ayahuasca because it got problematic, right?
Sure.
So I go to these next 2 ceremonies. And, the first one's reflected back to me this tendency to like overthink, right? Like get in my head, focus too much on the figuring out of things instead of like the deeper understanding of things. Message came up over and over. So I get to these ceremonies, and I should mention on my first ceremony, there was one part of it took me to what was called like the storage space or something. And it was like this, again, this is like, you're on a very powerful substance. So this is the experience you're going through. I don't want to say this is objective reality or anything like that.
Sure.
But it took me to the center of what was like the hologram, I guess you could say. And it was like stacks of information that were like coded.
So your back files, kind of like your
back files, right?
Okay.
Back files. It had that for me. It had it for like the entire universe. It was like the storage space. And so I had this idea in my head, like, oh, I want to see like more of that, right? So I go back to the ayahuasca ceremonies with this intention of trying to figure out what all of that is. And so I spent one of the ceremonies in a very frustrating space of like seeing all this information and not knowing how to read it. And I got stuck in this loop of like, I want to read this. Like I want a Rosetta Stone for understanding like these like reams of information that I'm seeing. And the message
so
that
there's
kept
that
coming.
Mind again. You want to know, right?
Coming right? And I was so stubborn about it. I was like, I don't, and the message I was getting from ayahuasca, which just for context, like there's a very strong female presence that shows up with this particular psychedelic. And that's the most intriguing part to me because it's such a consistent experience for pretty much everyone who experiences it. It's like you have this like mother energy that's coming in, often like appears visually like as an entity that's like guiding it, right? And there's, I mean, what that is, I can only, guess. But it's a very unique experience. So anyway, in this particular ceremony, I kept being told, you can't read it, you feel it. You can't read it, you feel it. And I was like, no, I want to read it. I was just like fighting it. I was just fighting. And so these ceremonies were kind of unsatisfying because I was still stuck in this like mental loop of like I need to figure it out.
You want to
There's something.
pinpoint it, right? You want to know the actual kind of, you want to hold it in your hand and say, I know, right? You have it right here.
I wanted to take it like kind of back up, right? And like, how can I use this like to facilitate healing with people better? Because at this point I had stopped doing consultations. Like I had opened up consultations on my blog for a number of years, and I'd had people come to me one by one with, people who'd gone to other, like not health authority, but other like health experts or like kind of renegade, like not really fitting into any box people. Sure. And no one could really figure out what their problems were, right? It was like these, like mast cell activation disorder was one woman who came to me. She came to me with like this thing. She'd been to the Mayo Clinic. She'd been to a bunch of the paleo people. Like everyone gave her ideas, but no one was helping her. And it was like cases like that where I was like, there has to be some missing piece of information that we can bring, right, to like kind of make this make sense and like actually facilitate actual improvement. So I went down with this like extractive mentality of like, what can I get from this ayahuasca space that I can then bring back to apply? And again, it was just thinky. So I ended those two ceremonies. There's a lot of other stuff that happened within each ceremony. It's just like an incredibly vast experience, but I felt very unsatisfied, and so I was like, I know I'm going to need to go back again.
So for a third 2-rounder, right?
Exactly. So this is where I was going, and it's easier to see it in retrospect now. But at the time, I was like, I have to keep going deeper and deeper with this before I have to figure it all out.
Which is very common. It happens with a lot of people. Yeah, you hear those stories all the time when people go on like 7 retreats in a row, right? And
there was just a woman. Her name's Oriana Joy. She was one of the people I saw on YouTube kind of when I was preparing for my first ceremonies, and she had done, I think, 70.
Wow.
I think it was 70, and it was one every other night for 4 months. Like she was in this apprenticeship training.
One every other night for 4 months. Oh my God.
So she has a YouTube channel. It's pretty easy to find where she's documenting all of her experiences. This was years ago. But she very recently came out and talked about how she blew out her nervous system just doing it that much. And it took her a really, really long time to recover from the experience of overwhelming her system with like these experiences one after another, which I bring up because this is what I ended up doing.
Okay. Yeah. So tell us about it. I love that you're bringing that up because, yeah, like I said, with, you either hear people just don't do it or they hate it. They think it's all dumb and it's all just made up and it's a hallucination, the kind of Richard Dawkins type guys, you know what I'm saying? Right. And then you have the other people that are just like, yeah, they can't stop doing it. They're doing one, like you said, I never heard of every other night for 4 months. That sounds rough.
Pretty intense, right? That one's I can't even imagine. Yeah. Like 2 nights in a row, I was like, I'm done for a while.
Yeah, like I don't know. That sounds rough.
It's very taxing on the body too. It's like because you don't sleep all night. Like there's a lot going on. You're puking.
Of course. So you signed up for a 3rd retreat. Yeah.
So I signed up for, and this was in September of last year. So I was doing 2 ceremonies every 2 months. And I went in with a mission this time. I was like, I'm gonna like drink so much of this stuff. I was like, I want to flood my system. Like my thought was, I'm gonna throw myself into the deep end and then like almost force an acquisition of knowledge or like a breaking point in myself to cause a transformation.
You started thinking about it too much again, didn't you?
I was thinking it. And the whole time I was like, I'm like, oh look, I got these like spiritual insights. It was like, no, I was just getting deeper and deeper into my mind. Yeah. And so I go to these ceremonies. The first one, I drank 6 cups of ayahuasca. All the previous ones I did like 3, I think max 2.5 maybe. And that's kind of the upper limit for like what your body can tolerate. In the first 4 ceremonies, I didn't throw up at all. Like I cried a lot, had other releases, but like I didn't puke. And so I was like, oh, my body can totally handle this. Like I'm just going to push it. So that first night drinking 6 cups, I knew I was doing something a little wrong. Started feeling nauseous.
Mm.
The shaman came with more brew, and I was like, I'm just gonna keep drinking until it's gone. Like I'm
Oh
just gonna
wow.
say
You
yes
went
to
past
everything that
6?
comes. I went past. So it was I think the sixth cup where I was like, oh, this isn't
Where I was like, oh.
not good. And it was a little too late to do anything about
Oh
it, right?
wow.
Yeah. So it was a weird it was a weird confrontation with my own desire to be like an intensity junkie
Hmm.
as a way to like get to spaces that I think that I can get to in my mind. Like it showed me a lot in retrospect. But at the time, I'm sitting there, everyone's starting to like the medicine's hitting, like the nausea is like insane. Just the amount of like because when you're on a psychedelic like that, everything's amplified. Every sensation in your body's amplified. Your hearing's amplified. Your sight, smell, all of it is like intensified.
Hmm.
So if you feel nauseous, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna go like eat some ginger and sit by the toilet. Like it's like, oh no, this is bad.
You gotta
Like I'm
barf.
suffering. You have to barf, and you
Yeah.
form a dialogue with the sensations that are coming up,
Hmm.
and so it to me what it felt like was there was this massive something that needed to get out of my body. Like this nausea formed this ball of just like darkness,
Hmm.
and as the medicine set in more and more and more, I just got more and more and more nauseous, and it got to the point where I was like, I felt like my body was splitting apart.
Hmm.
It was if you can imagine like a giant wrecking ball landing on your chest, and like the physical inability to hold it, right? It's like your body is no match for this force.
Hmm.
That's what it felt like. It felt like there was something that was breaking me apart. Like I had passed my ability to hold it physically. And so there was this one point where I was like, I just have to get this out. Like I tried throwing up, nothing was coming out. Stumbled to the bathroom like completely inebriated. Like I couldn't, like wobbly, like holding onto the walls, like, oh
No.
my God, I
Hmm.
can't move. And this was also my stubbornness and not asking for help to walk or anything. I was like, I can do it on my own.
Mm.
So I got to the bathroom, tried to throw up, I just could not throw up. And I was just like, the room was spinning. I was like, I didn't know what was going on. Next thing I knew, I was on the ground looking up. The shaman was here. One of the other participants was here. And I was like,
Hmm.
what happened? And I guess I went unconscious. So I blocked out in the bathroom. The person who was in the mat next to me, he had an intuition that I was struggling, and he like ran to the bathroom and caught me as I was falling. So it's the only
Oh
reason I
wow.
could my head. Yeah, it was amazing timing, and that's when I realized, okay, I might be causing some problems for myself
Hmm.
with this attitude of like going to extremes.
Hmm.
Nonetheless, the next night I did the same thing. I just
That's
so
the best.
this is where I'm at, right? This is where I'm at. I'm like,
Nonetheless, I took 8 cups the next
I
day.
think I mean, it was like, talk about being a slow learner, right? Um, so the part I want to emphasize here is like I would not. Well, I might redo those last two experiences, but like this whole trajectory I was on, um, I am definitely of the belief that you can obtain nourishment from any experience that lands in your field, right? So like here I am like trying to get something out of this psychedelic medicine. Um, Meanwhile, I had so many experiences confronting all these parts of myself that were harmful, right? Like the tendency to overthink and get obsessive about figuring things out, not letting things just remain mystery.
Hmm.
My tendency to be very stubborn, not ask for help, not say anything when I'm suffering. I mean, I didn't have to say yes to every single cup of ayahuasca that the shaman brought me, and I was just like, oh, he's still coming by, so I'm still going to keep drinking it.
Hmm.
My tendency to like just want like instead of respecting the slowness of life's processes in terms of like unfolding and gaining knowledge and gaining experience, like wanting to go immediately to extremes to the point where it causes physical or psychological harm. It's like there was a lot to unpack, right, in these experiences. However, so the second night ended and I felt so fucked up. I was like, something is wrong with my body. The ayahuasca had worn off. Everyone was kind of integrating the next day. We were all sitting around like in this like tent thing outside talking, and I was just sitting there like I felt like I was still stuck so deep inside of my mind, and I felt like there's something in my body that was like that hadn't come out. It was like the nausea had like formed this weird mass. It was like I felt so not myself.
Hmm.
And I mentioned that to a few people, and they're like, well, it'll take a few days. Like, you had a really hellish experience. Like, I was dragged through hell on the last lost ceremony. That was my experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, man, no, something feels very wrong.
Mm.
And for the next 6 months, I had daily panic attacks, dissociation episodes where it felt like a dimmer switch was getting turned on my entire reality. And it was like I was stuck in this like in-between state where hell was superimposed over my waking reality. And I was just like, I didn't know what was going on. Like I felt like, well, maybe there's like something I need to work through in this. Like I tried to put this like spiritual narrative over what was actually just like, I blew out my nervous system drinking an insane amount of a very potent psychedelic. And that I didn't want to admit that to myself. I didn't want to admit that like I had done something wrong.
Yeah, it's the last thing you want to admit, right? You want to say that you want to blame it on something else.
And this is the other thing too that I want to mention about like the psychedelic movement, and especially ayahuasca, is there's a tendency to get into like this almost like magical thinking mindset where it's like, well, the ayahuasca can do no wrong. If it brings you something, it's something that you needed to see. Like there's no way to like mess this up. Yeah. And
just like with diets, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Just like with diets. Just like with diets. And so there's some pressure to see things that way. And if you're struggling with something, it's because you didn't let go enough, or you didn't surrender enough. And I do think you can like tease apart any experience and like gain a ton of information about yourself from it. But at the same time, there's biological realities that we run up against when we're messing with our, neurochemicals, and when we're putting ourselves through experiences that can actually trigger different forms of trauma in the body. Like when I look back on my last 2 ayahuasca experiences, I can see pretty clearly that I drank way too much of it against my body signals that it was time to stop. Kept going with it, even though part of me knew it wasn't a great idea. And the result was like my body hit a point where it couldn't physically deal with the sensations that were coming at me. And so I blacked out. And whatever consequences of that were 6 months long, basically. And I had to deal with those for 6 months. And so that was a matter of personal responsibility that I didn't take at the time. Like I have no ill will towards the shaman. I think he did a great job. The facility was wonderful. It was very much a personal decision. And I say this because ayahuasca was absolutely the most significant thing that I encountered to like kind of shift my life path towards this other direction. And I can see ways that it can easily be abused, especially because we don't have like this big body of research for like, who's susceptible to like psychosis after ayahuasca. So there's like a glossing over of the potential problems, while also it's also this very therapeutic potential, right? There's a lot going on. And so I wanted to talk about my experience because it's still something that I would recommend to anyone who's feeling drawn to it, but used responsibly, if that makes sense.
So it is what it is. You can't change the past, and I'm sure something good will come of this, and I'm sure it already came. But looking back, would you have just done that one ceremony and then maybe waited, I don't know, a year or something like that? Is that the way you would have gone about it? Or maybe you recommend it to other people to do it like that?
I would say at this point, take inventory of your intentions, your motivations. Like, do you want to do ayahuasca because you knew somebody who went and saw like sparkles and unicorns and like, met God, met the aliens, and like they came back like, oh, that's so great.
Oh my God, look at my new bead bracelet. It's so awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because there's like a word of mouth thing. It's like you hear that somebody had a really incredible experience and like you want to go through that too. Like that's completely understandable. Yeah. So I've like in the research I've done since then, I think also if you are like in the very immediate term entering a ceremony with your nervous system like super activated, like fight or flight response, let's say like you're going through like a divorce like that's like acute, or like you're like maybe physically sick or something. If there's something that's kind of pushing you up in terms of nervous system activation, that seems to be when bad trips happen. Like I don't want to say for sure, like this is just a very observational note. But I think you need to be taking inventory of where you're at, like in terms of just where your body's at, because it's a taxing.
Yeah, substance. I've heard the same stories, the same accounts of people. Yeah, it's not to say that you have to have because if you're drawn to it, probably not everything in your life is perfect, quote unquote, whatever that means.
Exactly.
But I think, yeah, just like you said, if your body is already in a stressed state 24/7, like you said, you're going through a divorce and whatever, you hate your job and you hate everybody and you're, already anxious as fuck, probably not the best time to do it, right? Probably
Right.
a better time was when you're, yeah, sure, maybe you're feeling down but you kind of, your place. I feel like you have to have,
Yeah.
I feel like you have to have some steady ground. You can't be just on completely, these these pebbles that you're standing on trying to jump around all day. You know what I mean? I think you need like at least one little steady piece of ground that you can kind of connect to before you do like a journey like that,
I think that's exactly it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's been a wild ride this past year.
Yeah.
I did ayahuasca, and so my last 2 ceremonies also, I got like, the ayahuasca spirit told me like, don't come back. Like, you're done. You're like, don't like, no more for you. Yeah. Like, it was like a clear message. She was like, if you try doing this again, it's gonna get real bad. Like, you think this is bad, it's gonna get even worse. Mm-hmm. So I took that to heart. But I will say the experiencing psychedelics, especially ayahuasca, is my first ever like intentional altered state of consciousness experience. It made me realize how much is there that I had been judging, mm-hmm. right? And because since then I've done mushrooms 4 times. My boyfriend grows them, so it's like, supplies like right here.
Supply and demand.
Those have been much more gentle, I would say, and mm-hmm. I would almost recommend those for anyone who wants to kind of experience what psychedelics do, like for your mind, because my experience with them has been a very like deep organizational experience of the mind, where it's like you get these components that feel maybe you're kind of blind. Like it's like when we have tender spots in us, your mind finds ways to divert your attention away from those so that you never have to really confront them. The mm-hmm. ego really likes to feel safe. But on mushrooms, it's like you can almost see the clarity of everything in a better way. And then like, oh, that's why I do that thing. Or this is this pattern that I see showing up in my relationship. It also shows up in my work. It also shows up here and here and here. Mm-hmm. And it has a clarifying potential, as long as you don't abuse it. So I would say like, I have a very deep, like, obviously after all the experiences I went through this past year, I'm like, I want to research psychedelics. Like, I want to mm-hmm. help people who maybe fuck themselves up doing the kind of same thing I did, because there has to be ways to get the benefits without pushing people into risk territory, like unintentionally. And so like, that's kind of where my focus is right now. It's like, mm-hmm. how do we help people integrate? How do we help people kind of come back down to reality after they are flying through the cosmos?
Yeah.
And that, because I think that whatever potential there is going to get unlocked is going to kind of push humanity into its next almost wave of like whatever, mm-hmm. right? It's like we had the internet. That was kind of like our last like, whoa, look at this big advancement. And we've been in this like plateau.
Yeah, I feel like we're back to like, I don't know though. Like how back in the day people used to say like, you'll go to, if you want to learn something, you have to go to the library. Let's say you and I are hanging out and I say something, whatever, the earth is flat. Like for you to find out, you have to go to the library, you would have to go and research that. You would believe me right on the spot, right? Now it's like, okay, I'll tell you the earth is flat. You'll Google it. But when you Google it, you'll find 50% of the articles will say it's flat, 50%. Well, it's an extreme version, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like with diet, right? 50% of the articles will say vegan diet is the best. 50 of them will say paleo diet is the best. And then we're back at this like square one where I don't really know what's the answer. There's no answer because we've all been taught that the answer is on the internet. But I think we're back, you know what I'm saying, to just being at that before pre-internet age,
It's like we switched from like, that's exactly it. We switched from this like knowledge as scarcity, mm-hmm. right? It's like it's like you had to be like an apprentice to like someone who has this knowledge, or like learn from under the study of somebody. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think even the school structures we have right now are becoming archaic, right?
Oh yeah, well they've been archaic, but yes.
Yeah, they really says the person who didn't graduate college.
Yeah, get out of here. I graduated, and every fucking moment of it, I was like, I can't wait till I'm done, because it's just, it's not set up. That's my favorite thing about college too, is that we have classes that teach you how to be like a critical thinker, and it's like, if I'm a critical thinker, like, this is the dumbest thing I'm doing with my life, being in this fucking school. Sorry, no offense, but you know what I'm saying.
Critical thinking way right out the front doors. That's exactly it, right?
I mean, seriously.
Yeah, and I mean, both of my parents worked in higher education. Like, my dad was a college vice president, and like I had a lot of academia kind of in my field, and I think that's part of what showed me the amount of bureaucracy that's in our school systems. You realize there's very little like purity of knowledge focus, right? It's like they are very much systems that are created to create a workforce.
Yeah, we have this idea of like, you go to this institution, and this institution does these, does this research and talks about it and lets you think freely and lets you make up your own mind, but you have to have proof with it, right? And all that. But it's really not like that. You have professors that have their own thoughts and their own priorities and, their own biases, and you have institutions that have their own biases, and it's just on and on and on. Yeah, I mean, if you can't tell, I'm not a big fan of that whole system.
Oh,
myself.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Definitely. So yeah, I mean, you're right though. It's like we have the way going back to your original point, like with Google, it's at the point where we have so much information, it's almost back to an equivalency of not knowing anything.
That's what I'm saying.
Now the goal is how to tease apart the information that we're inundated with and find what the actual kernel of truth is in there, which, I mean, there's no way to teach that to somebody like without kind of, I guess, shaping their mind in a way that is able to be like more truth-seeking oriented, which I think maybe psychedelics are a way to actually do that, because I know for me I've had this division between my personal life and my public life for a really long time. Like, always, like, I have this like truth-seeking mentality that I've approached my career with, and kind of made a brand of what is the actual truth amid all these different dogmatic systems. But in my personal life, that has been so much harder, right? Because like all these spots of denial that I think every person has in different ways, you want to circumvent those, and then you just end up with this like twisted like version of what you see in yourself, and then sometimes you can project that outwards, and it can muddy up what you're finding externally too. I know that's very, very abstract and conceptual, but like I think there's a thing that happens there. And I've noticed that the more clarity I've gotten about who I am as a person and just my own patterns, like things that I never would have been able to confront earlier on in life, it's almost like I can see the external world more clearly too, and like find when something feels off, even if you're not quite sure why. It's like, truth radar is like going right there.
Yeah. Spidey sense is kicking in.
Right.
Do you feel like you would have, if you would have just done that one ceremony, do you think you would have thought about all these things as deep as you have? Or maybe it was necessary for you to go that deep that you went, and to break a few things in there before you kind of rebuild again?
I mean, I wish I could say that I could have gotten to that point just through like a more natural progression, but there was definitely no event in my life more acute than seeing the physical and psychological consequences almost like amplified, right? It's like these natural tendencies I had that were already maladaptive for me, they got pushed to an extreme under the lens of ayahuasca. And it was like this meta experience at that point. It's like this wasn't stuff that like got downloaded into me like during my ceremonies. It was like observing my behavior and then my reactions and like the ricochet effect showed me like, holy shit, like I can't keep doing this. Like I can't keep overthinking things to this degree, thinking that I'm making progress and absolutely not going anywhere with it. I have to let go of some of my stubbornness. Like, I mean, cause like during the 6-month period where I was just completely not myself, everyone who like my family was commenting, like, you don't seem happy. Like, you don't seem like yourself. Like, you seem super off. My poor boyfriend, like, many times tried to lead me into, like, maybe you're thinking about this too much. You might be, like, analyzing this too much. You might just want to, like, let it go. And I was like, no. Like,
I'll analyze it more. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. I'll analyze it more. I'll figure out my overanalyzing by analyzing it. Like, it just turned into this, like, and I know that the intensity of that experience definitely is going to stick with me for my whole life. Like anytime I feel tempted to go back to that way of doing things, I'm like, remember what happened with that hell period? Let's not do that anymore. It doesn't work. So I can definitely see how, I mean, I can create a narrative for all of those experiences that feels very satisfying in retrospect, especially because I'm not having like the, those panic attack dissociation episodes anymore. But at the same time, I think there would have been other ways to like get to that experience. So it's like in retrospect, I think you can, as long as you don't approach the world with like a sense of being a victim to it, you can find meaning in anything. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean that something had to happen in order for you to get from point A to point B. I think we have a lot of routes that we can go through. But it's kind of like this paradox of like the path is perfect and things have consequences. So
it's a great way of putting it. Yeah. Well, take me back to these, these 6 months that were so hard. I mean, when you say dissociative episodes, you mean like sort of like what they call depersonalization, those sort of things that people have after doing, people have gotten that after doing like even marijuana or, cannabis, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Even simple things like that.
Yeah. It was, so like the experience of it was, so I've had panic attacks occasionally throughout life. And it wasn't, because at first I was like, is this, it wasn't a full panic attack type thing. It was like the beginning of starting to feel hyper aware of every sensation in your body and like getting like super internal, right? Like you're like, all of a sudden you feel your heartbeat. You're like super aware of the fact that you're breathing and causing your lungs to go up and down. And that would be followed by like a huge wave of nausea, very evocative of my ayahuasca experiences. It was like I was being brought back into those last ceremonies for, anywhere between a few minutes and maybe 30 minutes. So that would happen. I would start panicking. The most intense episode I can remember was I was taking a train down from Seattle to Portland. I was just sitting on this Amtrak train, like looking out the window, and then all of a sudden everything went dark. Like it was like just like a dark gradient got put down over everything. I could still see, but it was like muddy and gray. And I had this thought of, oh my God, I'm in hell. Nobody in this train can help me. I'm completely stuck inside of myself. I'm like lost in the universe. It was just this like impending doom to the extent where I think I was trying to text at the time and I just had to put my phone down and like look at my hands and like try to keep breathing. And there was just a fracturing of identity that it wasn't like an ego death type thing. It was like something's just fucked up. Like and it was so hard because I would get into this thought loop of, okay, maybe I'm feeling like this like call back to the nausea because there's something in my life out of alignment that I need to like figure out. And so it got back into like this figuring out thing where I would assign meaning to every sensation I was feeling in my body. And then it just got into this obsessive thing. Like, it was, no, and I was like, but if I just figure it out, then I can release it. And that was the loop that just kept playing over and over every time this would happen. And it's, I really couldn't see outside of that. I couldn't see outside of any of that. And so this happened for 6 months. And I'll be also transparent that the thing that actually completely took it away, I did ecstasy. I did MDMA.
Oh. Jesus, Denise, so you're killing me here.
And so this is actually interesting because there's MDMA therapy right now, and this was the drug I had the most judgment against, apart from like party drugs like cocaine.
Which
or
is
heroin.
Funny, right? Because that one is, I think it probably has the most clinical research being done with it.
It does, especially for PTSD, which is essentially what I developed in a way after like a physically traumatic experience, psychologically and physically traumatic experience, in the sense of like damaging the nervous system, like trauma. I don't want to say like trauma. Trauma is a loaded word, but like I definitely was damaged. I damaged myself within those ayahuasca ceremonies, and then was having this like pretty consistent with certain forms of PTSD. And I just could not get back to that spot of remembering where to go in my mind to get out of it. I was just stuck on the circle. Like I knew there was like a ladder somewhere that I could climb and like the sun would be shining again, but I just could not find it. Right. And so I did, this was an ecstasy. I want to say very clearly, like this is one where you have to be very careful. Like, you got to protect your brain. very easy to damage a lot of things if you do it excessively. This was like a one-time thing for me. But the experience of having all of the judgment, thinking, shame, all of these spots where I was like just stuck in this loop of figuring it out so that I can like heal and be back, all of it just lifted, right? Like you feel amazing. Obviously it's ecstasy. You feel amazing. And so all of those things lifted, and it's like my body got this map of how to get back to that state of normalcy. It's like, okay, wait, this is what you felt like before all of this stuff that you piled onto it. This is what it felt like. Here's how to get there. And so I did that once, and none of all of it ended.
And that was like an overnight thing. I mean, you literally
overnight, completely ended. Never came back.
And was this a special kind of, I don't know, because they do ceremonies with that stuff too, and all kinds of stuff, or was this just something that you did, I don't know, alone with a friend or whatever?
This was my boyfriend seeing how stuck I was inside of my head, and just having a feeling that this was going to help. And I was like so starved. I was like, dude, I don't want to do a party drug. I want to do like my spiritual psychedelics. Like I want to go do all these like astral things. And again, that was like a big moment of me having to eat my words and being like, oh my God, there's a lot of therapeutic value in this. Because the only times I'd ever like experienced anyone on ecstasy was like at parties where, someone would come up to you and they're like, oh my God, please.
This carpet feels so fucking good.
Your hand. Oh, let me rub your, and it's just like, shit, I don't want to do that. And I've definitely been a very serious person for most of my life. Like I never really I never valued like fun for a long time. So I had a lot of judgments against a lot of different things. And so after that, the like MDMA experience like almost reversed the damage I had done on this other drug. Again, I don't want to say like, let's just throw drugs on drugs to fix things. But this was a very, very important personal journey for me, especially because after I kind of realized, oh shit, like whatever this substance did, like it like did actually give my nervous system a reset to the point where I can function normally. I feel amazing. Like this was back in March when this happened. Yeah, it opened my eyes to like the therapeutic potential of a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And made me very curious. And so since then I've encountered a few other people who basically had a psychotic break on ayahuasca and were able to use MDMA therapy to get back to normal. So it's interesting to me, especially again as somebody who like for my first 32 years of life, I was staunchly anti-drug. I didn't even want to touch them. So many judgments, a lot of judgments against people who did them, even recreationally, even like therapeutically. I mean, I had met people from ayahuasca, like we were talking about, that are just like, they never come back down to earth. And there's that's off-putting too, right? It's like we don't come to be human to stop being human, right? It's like if your path here is an attempt to outrun the things that make you very, very human and to like, fix them, or, there's a thing there that happens where you just stop being embodied. You just kind of, you're just not here.
Yeah. It's like that Buddha quote, right? Where he says, before enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water. And after enlightenment, you chop wood and carry water.
I love that one. That's exactly
me too. So you got to stay here. And but when you say like MDMA therapy, so the people that I'm assuming you've only tried that one time. Did you do it more?
That was a one-time thing. I mean giving drug advice on your podcast. I can't believe it.
It's fine. I'm doing some right now. I'm kidding. Okay.
So they say you need at least 3 months between any experience, just because it does like it basically tells your brain, let's dump all of the serotonin out and just flood you, and so you feel absolutely amazing for however long the trip lasts. But then there's definitely like a rebound effect where for a few days you're just gonna feel like, whoa, like you're something happened to your brain, like you feel it.
I mean, have you talked to anybody that's done like clinical trials or anything like that? Like have been involved in those?
I've only on Reddit, like
No. But hey, I mean that's where it's at right now. You can't just because they're not talking about it. I mean, openly at least.
That's it. It's like it's so hard to find like a group of people, who've been like they've done it under some type of controlled setting. Everyone is going to explain their experience with their own filter, their own bias. You never know what somebody's background was, what the context was.
Right.
There's just so many unknowns. And it's a really unfortunate thing that these drugs are still so generally illegal, because it causes that effect of like, it's harder to get funding for studies that would actually improve the ability to make them legal by making them safer. So it's kind of like, I know right now MAPS is doing a lot of amazing research. Like they did a psilocybin study. I think they did, or was it Johns Hopkins? One of the places that's studying, therapeutic use of psychedelics. Psilocybin, like I think it was two doses of psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms. 50% of the people who went in with depression went into remission.
Which is a lot more than our current prescription drugs that your doctor will readily prescribe to you when you go to their office.
Exactly, a lot more and fewer side effects.
Fewer side effects, and also, I try to be objective. I try to be an objective person, because you do, like you said, you do also wonder who are those people, what's their background, because all that stuff matters. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully there'll be more trials done that you can talk about and you can see and people can research about it. Have you looked into the other, like other places that do, ibogaine, peyote, mescaline, right? Those sort of places. Have you looked at any of that stuff?
I'm only familiar with a place called Mind Bloom that uses ketamine, and ketamine is a weird one. I have.
Yeah, sorry. I just remember there's a clinic here in LA actually, and it's legal. You can go. It's a real doctor and blah blah blah. They'll monitor you and they'll administer you ketamine for depression. I think that's the number one kind of thing for it.
It's as far as I know, it's the only one that's actually like legally approved to be used in those situations, and I think that's because it's technically a tranquilizer. Like it's been approved for. I'm trying to find all my wires are like.
No worries.
Yeah, since it's already like approved for like medical use, I think that made it easier to get snuck in for like these other purposes. So from my understanding, like ketamine, at very low doses, it'll have like a dissociative effect. So you're almost able to get some distance from whatever it is you're acutely experiencing. And I'm going to butcher anything I try to explain about it, because this is the one I probably know the least about. But they're having a fair degree of success using it for those purposes too. Yeah. And then at higher doses, you get like the K-hole experience, which is like consciousness.
Yeah, I hear some crazy stories about that one. I don't know if I'm ready.
that one sounds like the biggest wild card to me, because like you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. I don't know if that really has a lasting therapeutic effect.
I don't know either.
Yeah, so that one's an unknown too.
You brought up an interesting word though, and I've been thinking about that a lot. Like you said experience. Because, like I said, if you're depressed and anxious and you go to your doctor and you ask them for some SSRIs, they prescribe you a pill that you take every day. Usually, well, not usually, it's always now. I think it's at least a year. If you get the prescription, you should be taking it for a year. That's like the minimum dose, for like Lexapro or, any of those SSRIs. I can't remember. They change the name so often, Anyway. And it's funny, right, that these other drugs that we're talking about, it's more of an experience type of thing. It's not a thing that you do every day. You keep taking it because you have to kind of keep pushing that button every day in order to feel better. It's more so like you have this experience, and now you go into the world and see what it's like from there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's much different, and I think I know at least with psilocybin, I think they're finding this with ayahuasca too, is that it has the potential to generate new neurons, like in the brain. Like for one experience of it can like create these baby new pathways. And then if you can just keep reinforcing those pathways after this one experience, you can almost build a new system for yourself that doesn't include the same deviations that create depression or anxiety. And so it's almost like, I don't want to say like a cure, but I think it's like a reshaping that it can do.
Mm-hmm.
that we haven't achieved with most pharmaceuticals at this point, which that makes it intriguing to me, because like I don't want to put people on like a drip feed of like you just
Yeah.
have to do this every day for the rest of your life to be
Yeah.
normal.
Well, also like it's not a good it's not a good I don't know, it's not a good deal for the medical system. You know what I mean? Because we give you this one experience and then you're healed. It's like,
Right.
no,
It's about
motherfucker, we got to
money.
get you every day for a
Yeah.
10-year prescription at least. You got to go to CVS every day, you know, every few months
Please
to pick up
keep your
the
problems so that we can make money off of them.
so
Exactly.
that's an interesting distinction, right? To really think about it. And I was thinking about it. I was like, I don't know if it'll, even with the MDMA thing, like, I don't know if it would ever be possible unless, again, maybe if we as a humanity in general take a whole new step in our evolution and create some sort
Yeah.
of new medical system. But like, as I'm saying, I don't know if it'll ever be a part of the medical system, because it's not a pill that you take every day. It's not a, you know, a button that you press every day. It's this experience and then you're done with it, well,
Right.
supposedly, right?
Right. Right.
I don't know. So did you have that experience that everybody so commonly says as, you know, ego death, or, you know, ego dissolution, or whatever you want to call it? Do you feel like you've been through that?
I don't think I've hit that point. I think
Mm-hmm.
that my at least when I look at ayahuasca, the first two ceremonies were very much about like seeing all the spots where I don't allow myself to receive love, including from myself. Like there was a big focus on like don't be so hard on yourself. There was definitely more of an identity component. Like it wasn't like I vanished, right? It was like I was still there. I was just kind of learning all these ways that I was blind to, that I was making my life harder and not letting things in.
Mm-hmm.
My experiences with mushrooms, I think, got closer to what you're talking about. Although there wasn't like a breakthrough where I left my body and like, oh, I'm part of the universe or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But there was definitely like a veil being lifted on like the highest dose of mushrooms I did was 4 grams. And I did that shortly after I got to Phoenix. Like we moved here, like I moved here with my boyfriend. We did a little road trip here. Got here and I was like, I want to do mushrooms, and he's been good because he's seen me go through the I want to do more and more and more to get a bigger experience. And he's like 3 grams is enough, 4 grams you don't want to do the shamanic meet the aliens dose. And I was like, I want to. He's like, you don't need that. Anyway, it's good to have a grounding force in my life given my natural inclinations to
Definitely.
just push things to the extreme. But that ceremony was like, it brought me back to this space that felt like home.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, like, and kind of to scroll back. So you know there's different theories of like what generates consciousness. You have like the standard materialism framework, which is everything is just generated by brain reactions, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
once biological life ends, consciousness ends, like
Mm-hmm.
bottom line. I think there's a lot of strikes against that theory. I mean, if you look at the research on near-death experiences and the number of people who can report accurately things that were happening in their operating room or wherever they were in the hospital while they were registering zero brain activity,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of stuff there that's kind of, whatever. There's a guy named Ian Stevenson. He
Yeah.
founded. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah. But you could say it's at least fascinating, right? At
It's
least you
fascinating.
can say that.
There's a lot. It opens up a lot of unknowns, and
Yeah.
I'm always of the mind that whatever we're experiencing here, we're so limited in our ability to comprehend.
Yeah.
Like even if you go into like a psychedelic experience and then you try to explain it when you're back like kind of sober,
Mm-hmm.
you can't. Like
It makes zero sense, right?
There's
Mm-hmm.
just there's so little that you can really convey.
Yeah.
It's like taking like a globe of the earth and then trying to like convey it on a map. It's like you're always going to have some weird like flattening that just it's not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you have like anyway, you have this idea of the mind generating consciousness, and I'm personally not a believer in that, but it's still kind of the prevailing paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
If you suggest things outside of that, you're considered kind of woo. There's like
yeah, even though they literally have no fucking clue what causes consciousness, absolutely zero. Like there's nothing. You can't even you can't argue it. There's no Richard Dawkins, whatever, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Yeah. They have zero knowledge of what's happening there. It's just true. I mean, I'm not saying that we're right or they're wrong, whatever, but it's just the truth, right? Like they absolutely have no real like just nothing. I don't even know what to say. That's it. Just nothing there.
It's like where did life come from? It's the same kind of question. It's like there's been so many theories about like, well,
Yeah.
this amino acid combined with this led to this. But it's
Yeah.
like we still haven't been able to create life from
Sure,
nothing, from
yeah.
non.
And that at least is like there's this theory that does the Big Bang, that this and that, but with consciousness, they have no idea. They try monitoring brains, they can't
Yeah.
fucking understand why it's doing this, why it's doing that. Oh yeah, we figured out where, that this part of the brain lights up when you're excited. Oh wow, like that means that it doesn't really mean anything.
Yay! Yeah, exactly. And there's what I think is like, you can measure, you can have somebody going through an experience, and then you can kind of watch what their brain is doing coinciding with that experience. But it's kind of like saying like, oh, the rods and cones in your eye are what like, caused the object in front of you. It's like, no, that's your interpretive, like that's your biological tool for interpreting something that exists.
Yeah, well, and then you look at the research of like meditation, and then like their brain doesn't light up when they do the same cues for them. And it's like,
right.
So what the fuck?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a certain arrogance that permeates a lot of like the scientific community. And so I think we're going to see more and more evidence kind of chipping away at a lot of the prevailing paradigms. It's like the book. Have you read the book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions?
Not that one, no.
Something Kuhn. I also have not read it, but I've read.
I read about it.
Enough of it to like get like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it's this idea of we like throughout human history, we've like reached different understandings and models of like how things work, right? And like we'll create a model that explains a lot, like maybe 90% of what we're perceiving. We run with that because it works so effectively for the time we generate it. And then you start getting towards the edges of our understanding, and the predictive ability of our models start fracturing. And all of a sudden it's like with like the rice diet thing, right? It's like, okay, so you have like the carbohydrate insulin model. It can explain a lot, but then you get these little anomalies. And it's like,
well, then you find more and more and more, and then you're
more
like,
and more and more. Exactly.
It doesn't fit with my idea of the world. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, and you see that everywhere though. And so then you get to the edge of this, and like suddenly the paradigm breaks. And that's the point where you have what the author of this book called a paradigm shift. It's like the whole way you're looking at something has to like level up, and it's you can't even, from where you are right now, it's like you can't even predict what that's going to be. But it's going to like cause like a worldview shift for like the entire community. So I think we're going to have that with consciousness at some point. Like the thing we're working with right now that we're still holding on to, its predictive quality is failing. Right. So we're having more and more anomalies that we're bringing up. And yeah, you can like try to dismiss every single one as like, oh, that person made that up, or that person was crazy, or that study was rigged, or whatever you want.
That's the best way to dismiss those people. Yeah. And like you said, even with the brain thing, it's like, there's lots of, well, that's the thing. If you're a physicist and you believe the things that the mainstream physicists like say, if you agree with them, you're cool. If you're a physicist that, says something else, you're a quack. That lovely word that I love, that American word, quack. It's just like,
great way to just dismiss
you're insane. Yeah, because there are a lot of physicists that believe that the brains, like you said, there's that model. Sorry, there's that model that you described, and then there's the other model of your brain is more of like an antenna that kind of receives this, information, and it's just from somewhere else, and then that's what's happening when you're processing stuff.
Right. So it's that one makes a lot more sense to me. I think we're gonna probably be moving towards that, if I had to predict. It's like, so brain activity coinciding with experience, and then there might be this deeper thing that's kind of causing both of those at once, right? Like Aldous Huxley had the idea of like the mind is a filter. Like you have this like greater reality, and then you have something that limits you to just be able to perceive like physical senses and not get completely overwhelmed by every detail around you. It's like, because like mushrooms are a good example. When you're on mushrooms, you're walking around, everything is amazing. It's like, stars. It's like, oh my God, look at the stars. Look at my hand. Oh my God. And it's just like the amount of information that you're taking in at once, which again is why like, set and setting are so important. It's like if you're around something that's really like difficult, like you're going to amplify that. But it's almost like some filters have been removed, right? So you could either view it as, okay, your senses are amplified, or maybe our natural state, whatever, like, just pure distilled consciousness is so receptive and so aware and so connected that you have to put filters on it in order to function in a physical human body in this reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that one resonates more with me, especially like based on my experiences, like again, going back to like the ego death thing. When like doing 4 grams of mushrooms, my experience was being back in this realm that was the same place as ayahuasca. It was just like this like home channel almost. It's like, you know, you're still here, but you can see the nuance of everything that actually does exist, and you can interact with it, and it's like palpable. In that state, like my identity is Denise left, and like you know, I believe in reincarnation, but this could be this interpreted as just, you know, symbols that my mind came together with. Like I had a memory of like living in the desert of like Phoenix, like in a tribe, and like being pressed up against this wall as like arrows were flying by, and like just having this thought of I have to hide in order to survive. And that showed up for me because I had been working on this this personal pattern of like hiding from the public. Like I even did it with my blog and my public job. It's like I went into this like state of like, oh, I just have to get away from everything, go underground. I do that with people in my life. I've done that like even in the context of relationships, like just having this posture of hiding that I took with me everywhere. And I couldn't figure out why it felt like a life or death thing to be seen. And so like I was in this one psychedelic trip with mushrooms, and like this one memory of like my heart racing, pressed against this wall, just trying not to be seen, and like the way that connected with survival for me. Hiding is survival. Like I was able to release so much just from feeling that connection, just being like, oh shit, like that's why I feel this way, that's why I've carried this with me. It's completely irrelevant now, like I don't need to do that, but I still had this like some type of memory embedded that I had been carrying with me throughout all of my life experiences. So that was kind of the closest thing I got to like losing my identity as Denise. And again,
on
like
mushrooms, surprisingly, right?
Not on mushrooms.
Yeah. And is it Terence McKenna that said that 5 grams? Is it 5 grams? That's the heroic dose or whatever? He coined that term or whatever.
I think 5 grams. 5 grams. I think he had the whole like 5 grams blindfolded, alone in the dark or something is the way to like do the full experience.
That sounds intense.
That sounds super intense. I mean, I always use music, and that's such a big contributor. I could see how if you're in complete silence, the thing that you're going to be building off is like whatever minutia is kind of happening inside, which sounds, you know, after my experience with ayahuasca, I want to take it a lot more gently. So
yeah. Well,
we'll see,
you know, I mean, I wanted to talk to you about that, you know, because look, I want to talk about it from the other point of view now, because plant medicines, you know, quote unquote, have kind of become like face tattoos. Do you know what I mean? Like 30 years ago, they fucking meant something. Like dudes, if you saw a dude with a face tattoo, like that's a hard dude. You know, he probably was in jail, he killed somebody, God knows. And then now it's like, if you have a face tattoo, it's like, I have 100,000 followers on Instagram and I moisturize. Like, right? Like, like that's what it means now, right? And plant medicines have also become that thing where it's like I said, people used to, you know, I mean, it was hard to find, like, you know, I've read about that stuff, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And even 10, 15 years ago, which is not that long ago, it's already the internet age, it was hard to find stuff like that. I mean, to like really read about it, you know, there was only like those thick books by like Terence McKenna and whatnot, you know? And then now you just have every fucking biohacker from Silicon Valley that wears blue blockers flying to, you know, Costa Rica, and he's doing these trips, and then he's microdosing you know, LSD daily, and he drinks, you know, oat milk lattes, and it's just like, you know, it just became this like thing that to like, you know, like I've been in the fitness, nutrition, health, and world for a long time too, and like, you know, there's so many fads that I'm just like, ugh, like, you know,
cringeworthy,
yes, and it's I hate to see this stuff sort of become like that, but it kind of has. You have to admit that it's becoming this like
completely has. It's like I mean, it's at the beginning. It's like when all of a sudden, like, you know, your mom got a tattoo. And you're like, oh, this is like like, like this is
like if your mom joined Instagram, right? And she like follows you and comments on your shit. You're like, oh, I don't know, maybe I should get off.
Exactly. So I think we're absolutely at that crux, which is why like my personal goal is to like write about this kind of thing online more and start sharing my personal experience because I think it could be valuable to prevent people from kind of going down the same mistake path that I went down. Because on one hand, yes, there's like tremendous therapeutic potential, as there is with, changing your diet, as there is with like any of these things that have gotten blown up into a religion. At the same time, there's a very distinct lack of quality control in terms of like who really should be using these things. Like, what's the appropriate reason? Like, are there things that you can try first that might be less risky or might like keep you more down to earth? And as things become more popular, yeah, there's totally like this like novelty seeking or like tourism about it that is less about what that deeper therapeutic potential is, and more about like just getting a new experience. You're just like, my friend did this, my whatever did this, I want to try it too. And I think that's where the dangerous territory is, because plant medicines they're very powerful. Like, they have a very, very deep ability to affect things about the way you see your life, the way you see yourself. They can cause physical changes. Like, I mean, there's definitely people who've had psychotic breaks doing psychedelics and like just never came back. Like, we need to acknowledge that fact. It's not something it's not like a party drug that you go and you do it because you want to have a good time or like a good experience. Because like there's an unpredictability. Even like comparing it to alcohol, like what you're getting with alcohol. Wow. You're not going to have like a good trip on alcohol one day, a bad trip on another day, and then be like, then have 6 months of panic attacks, right? It's a more predictable thing there. With plant medicines, you really don't have a way to control the outcome. It's like you are putting yourself in a receptive state to whatever experience arises. And you can control a few of those variables. You can like try to make sure that you're in a good setting. You could try to go, to a very legit retreat center. But like at the end of the day, you don't know what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. And you have to be prepared for whatever comes into your life to then be your responsibility to handle. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the part that's kind of missing, because there's too much like excitement and hype right now around like the potential like benefits without this like grounding to it too.
And especially being illegal in the States, right? It's kind of hard to find what's not, but even going to, I don't know, have you ever thought about going to, like one of those, where it's legal, Costa Rica, I guess, Peru or Brazil, whatever people go. Maybe look at some of those centers and stuff. Can't remember the name of one. Costa Rica. Like Dorian Yates been there, like all these kind of famous people, but anyway.
Yeah. There's, I think you still run into the same problem. I mean, you have, even if you go to a place that is, heavily trained, the people who are running it are maybe like legit, like generational shamans who've been trained and like have been working towards this their whole life. If you're coming as an American, for an example, or Russian, wherever you're from, and you're showing up at one of these places with your backdrop of Western experience, right? And I'll say to you, like, I think the Western mindset tends to be very extractive in nature in general. You want to go get yours. You want to go get and grab and hoard and like hold on and acquire. And it's far less like, I think psychedelics need to be approached with a receptive state instead of like this like penetrative, let me go into this experience and grab everything I can out of it. Like, you need to just like, all right, what comes to me, I'm going to be open to that. I'm not going to fight it, which is a much different relationship with psychedelics than I think a lot of people approach it with, again, with like this Western mentality. So, if you're like a Westerner, you hear about you want to go to Costa Rica or Peru or Ecuador or wherever, and you go down there and like, let's say you've had depression your whole life and you're like, I want something to fix my depression. I keep hearing about all the stuff fixing my depression. I'm going to go down there. You have maybe an amazing experience. Okay. Amazing experience. You experience life without depression for a few days. You come back to the US, you're glowing, and you're telling everybody, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. And then, a few weeks or months later, you're like, oh shit, okay, I'm depressed again. Oh no, it's coming back. Fucking plant medicine. God damn it. Right. It's like, is that really?
I'm going to write a bad Yelp review for that fucking shit.
I'm going to write that. I'm going to
just wait till you see the Google reviews on this motherfucker.
There you go. There you go. So I think there's a high risk of people doing that, because especially the more of like these miracle healing experiences that you hear about, you're going to go expecting a pill to make you better.
Yeah.
And it's just the same thing that we do. It's the same framework we're approaching drugs with, diet with, even exercise with. I want to do this so that it'll fix this. It's like you can't go with the expectation, with any expectation.
Mm-hmm.
The more expectations you saddle upon any experience with plant medicine, the more you're going to be disappointed. That's my opinion.
I love that you brought that up because it's important. Like you said, there is every culture and even every nation has, you know, a little bit of a different mindset, and you have to
Right.
I mean, first step is just to understand that you have a different mindset. You know, I think a lot of people are not quite there yet. You know what I mean? They just think everybody is. I mean, yes, people are, I guess, more similar than they are different. But, you know, even like when you're learning like a very foreign language, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, maybe French is doable, but like, hey, I'll take you to like Mandarin, Chinese. It's like a whole different thing, right? It's like you're not that, you know, that whatever, the connection is not there in your brain because it's just not part of our kind of system.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So I think that danger is always going to be there. And the other point being, it's like if you look at how these plant medicines have been used historically and culturally. I mean, I'm not someone to say like, you know, oh, using like ayahuasca's cultural appropriation unless you're like part of the tribe. Because I think that, I mean, no one has a monopoly on like wisdom, right? Or like there's we have different entry points into like these experiences, but like none of those are like trademarked or like patented. It's like this is accessible to like humanity as a whole. And if you're trying to be like,
well, not until Americans get their hands on it. You just wait. That's the thing.
Right. Exactly. I mean, so you know, there's definitely that mentality.
But that's a great way of looking at it. That's just an entry point. I think, like you said, that's a great way of putting it.
So like I don't want to say that people shouldn't be doing something just because they're not of that culture, like by blood. Mm-hmm. At the same time, if you look at the way these plant medicines were used, like, you know, generationally for a really, really long time, they're in tribal settings where, you know, it's like this, I think often with ayahuasca, it was only the shaman who would use ayahuasca and then like kind of bring wisdom back to the tribe or like get answers for how to heal people. It wasn't that everyone was imbibing. Mm-hmm. And like there's also the context of like the Western lifestyle is so foreign almost to like how humans have spent the majority of our existence on this planet. Like there's a book called Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes by Daniel Everett. Have you heard of this? It's a really interesting. It's about this, it's a Christian missionary who went down to this, I think they're called the Pilaha tribe. I might be saying that wrong. There was this one tribe in the Amazon where they sent missionary after missionary trying to convert them. And every time they're like, we don't need your God. And so they brought this one very talented linguist down named Daniel Everett who wrote this book. And so he's down there like trying to appeal to this tribe from the Western standpoint. I think he brought up at one point, I want to say it was his brother that committed suicide. I think it was someone close to him that committed suicide. And so he was telling the tribe this story, very sad story, you know, very difficult for him to tell about how his brother had killed himself due to like the lack of contentment in his life, maybe not having God. I don't recall the details. The tribe burst out laughing. Their response was, why would anyone kill themselves?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's like there's such different, just astronomically different ways of experiencing life. And like once you leave like that tribal setting where everyone has a role, like everyone's connected, like no one's left out, no one's living alone in an apartment like on the outskirts of town on Reddit all night. You know, it's a different experience with life itself that, you know, these medicines evolved in. Like and then so then you take a Westerner, there's so many unknown variables that you're throwing at this experience. And that's the part where, again, like you said, like this explosion of it becoming trendy, it's concerning. Because like a face tattoo is one thing. You might regret that. Like you're gonna regret that at some point. You might regret that likely at some point. But like if you have a bad experience on a psychedelic, like you might be broken for life. Like that sounds really dramatic, but there's people out there who've had that experience. Yeah. And I feel there are ways to prevent that, but we don't know what those ways are yet. So that's That's the sticky spot.
Yeah, the people that I've known that have been, broken is just the ones that just kept doing it and they're still doing it and they're just not there. I haven't heard any like, I don't know, anything worse than that. Have you heard some people just completely losing their shit and going to a mental hospital or what?
There's people that I've heard of who like they'll often like they already had PTSD or something.
Mm-hmm.
They went and did maybe ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is the one I've heard the most that has like the like, oh God, this pushed me towards a breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's people who didn't realize they had a lot of trauma, like maybe they were like sexually like horrifically abused when they were like 3 and they didn't remember it.
Mm-hmm.
They go under the plant medicine, all the memories come up and they just break. Like they just break. They cannot handle the amount of information that just showed up that changed their perception of their life and who they are. And then they just never come back to normal. And I have heard of people who like they stopped being able to function, like at their jobs. They had to like they're just in bed all day. A couple years after the experience, and again, like we don't have studies necessarily on these people.
Yeah.
And I was kind of searching to see what long-term studies there are being done, and the problem is like a lot of the times the people who are being followed up with long-term initially did their plant medicine experience in a controlled setting, like with MAPS or John Hopkins or whoever's doing it. And so there's more screening for those people. Like they're not going to bring someone in with schizophrenia. They're going to like make sure someone's stable enough to like handle the experience. And so the long-term effects of those people are going to be different than the long-term effects of like, Joe Blow off the street who like was like already like 98% insane and then went to like do ayahuasca and blew the other 2% out of the water. Right. Yeah. So there's just, again, there's so many unknowns, and I have seen enough like, oh shit experiences where, it gives me trepidation and saying like, everyone should go do this. It's like, really, you really need to evaluate where you're at in life. See if you have like the capacity to potentially hold a very physically demanding experience. If you're somebody who like breaks down, if you have like a really tight nervous system and like you just cannot handle, like you fly off the handle if someone cuts you off in traffic, or like you can't keep it together, like you might want to work on like meditation or just like getting to know your internal terrain better to expand your capacity to even just hold sensations, so that you can be entering these experiences and ceremonies with almost a better foundation. Like I think there's guidance that we can give to people, but it's very crude right now. It's all like so much of it's guesswork, and I don't even feel comfortable telling somebody like go do this plant medicine, even if they seem like they're in a great space to do it, because like I don't want the responsibility of if they have a bad experience and never come back from it. I don't want to be haunted.
They'll find you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So then what's next for you? So you're interested in writing about it, researching about it?
Yeah, I think so this was kind of my first like public talking about it, which I'm very grateful for you that you're
I'm very grateful for you for coming on. It was awesome.
Drugs on the internet as somebody who, is
hey, responsibly though, responsibly.
And that's really the biggest thing too. I'm if anyone can benefit from the experiences I went through via hearing what I did and maybe recognizing, oh, I kind of have that same pattern, or this was kind of the reason I wanted to do this, or, oh yeah, 100% worth it to me, like that I went through it, if I can then pass on what I learned from it. So, I mean, my next steps right now are like, I'm going to continue doing like personal research on the use of psychedelics. Like right now I have like a tab opening addiction on my browsers. Before I had to took like 15 minutes to close out everything before we did this this podcast, because I just have like study after study open. So right now I'm in the process of like kind of immersing myself in the research that's been done so far. And my specific interest right now is like if somebody has a really bad trip, right? Like if someone had like the last 2 ayahuasca experiences that I had, and then gets into this spiral of like, you do something physically to your brain that's like, it gets you stuck, right? How do we get out of that? How do we even understand what happened? I mean, like, is it that, you're taking a substance that has the potential to generate new neurons, first of all. So like you're kind of building these new pathways, and then the experience you have when you're building those pathways, it's like traumatic and anxiety ridden and like hellish. Is that going to like imprint is that going to form new pathways that are specifically that, right? And then you carry that with you after even the medicine is out of your body. That's kind of my working theory. And so I'm like exploring the links between like, you know, PTSD, MDMA. I'm just like, you know, drowning in information right now, which is my thing because I like to think so much. But
beautiful. Can you
like,
see yourself going back to writing about, you know, carbs and insulin and stuff like that?
you know,
To be honest,
peace of mind. I've promised so many people that I'm going to write in defense of low fat part 2 that I would like to uphold that commitment.
Okay.
It's so uninteresting to me right now. I have piles and piles of like little snippets that I've written. If I can't get myself to write a full blog post, I'm probably just going to publish like a bullet point list of like, here's this study. Like there's like really interesting studies on like potatoes, butter, and like insulin and glucose responses. Just for one example, it's like you take a potato, you leave it plain, you have someone eat it. If you add butter to it, the amount of insulin needed to process the carbohydrates in that potato goes up and up and up and up and up. So you can kind of start seeing how, you know, you take away the fat from your diet and you reduce the insulin response. Like there's mechanisms buried in there.
Yes. But the paleo, I'm just kidding.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm starting to become so disinterested with that world too, you know.
Really?
Yeah, I'm in the same, you know, boat as you. It's just like, cuz it's, you know, cuz now what you're just seeing reiterations of people popping up that are like new, you know, like things like carnivore diet, which I've experimented with 10 years ago. People are like getting into it now, you know, and you have all these you know, and then you have like you said, you're not going to throw anybody under the bus, but I will. Like, you know, people like Mark Sisson, who was like, you know, the paleo guy, right? Then he became like the keto guy. Then he became like kind of a carnivore guy. Now he markets this thing called metabolic flexibility, which is this thing, which means you can get energy from fucking whatever's available, like carbohydrates and fat and protein. Oh, like,
shocking.
So you're saying like a normal diet, aren't you, buddy? You know,
a novel concept.
Yes,
oh my
I
God.
posted about that on my, my Instagram.
That's funny.
Anyway, because you're just seeing people are kind of scrambling to find the new shtick, you know, and it's like hard, and then you're like, okay, well, this new thing, so. Yeah.
That's great to hear that you're in that spot too.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, I mean it's almost, I mean, I feel like every place I've gone, like vegan and then paleo, it's like my process tends to be I get into the community, I start seeing the faults and the cracks, and then I try to bring like some form of clarity and sanity to it. And I'd love to do that to the psychedelic movement because again, the amount of therapeutic potential there is incredible. And I'm even all of the bad experiences I had, like I still stand by that 100%. It's like it can bring you to a level of like understanding that kind of expedites the process. Like they say ayahuasca, one night of ayahuasca is like 10 years of therapy. That's exactly how I felt after for my first ceremony. I got out of that thinking like, wow, every question I've been grappling with and like slowly chipping away at, boom, answer, boom, answer, boom, answer. And that was stuff that it was stuff that preserved even after, you know, you're out of the ceremony. Cause sometimes you're in it, you're like, oh man, we can travel time if we just did this. And it's like, some of it doesn't stick. Right. But like the stuff that does stick, it's like, you have things that you really can bring with you and that do bring you a level of clarity that if you continue working on that, you can make huge strides in your life. Like I'll tell you right now, I feel better than I've ever felt at any point in my life. Like I feel like I know who I am. I feel happy, like deeply joyous, happy to be alive. And there was probably a decade and a half of my life where I couldn't say any of that. So the amount and so much of that though is not just like, you know, you put something in your body and it changes you. It's like you put something in your body, it shines a flashlight on all these areas that you couldn't see before. And then you have a bigger map to work with. And you're like, all right, this is where I can go. And your life feels more expansive. And you feel like you actually have, it's like the things that you thought were just part of who you are, they're not actually part of who you are. You know, you can be free of them.
I love that.
And right. So I'm hoping, you know, I think my next like research, like intensive is definitely going to be in like the psychedelic field, and in whatever ways I can contribute to that, even if it's just like talking to people who like, instead of doing a nutrition consulting, I would love to talk to people who are either preparing for a ceremony or coming out of it, or like who want some feedback on how to physically and psychologically prepare for whatever happens without expectation, but like building that foundation to carry an experience that might be very difficult potentially or very good. So like, that's kind of my focus at this point. And like, yeah, the food thing, dude, it's interesting. It's like when you first learn about things and you have this like, oh yeah, I feel great, switch my diet. It's easy to get really caught up in that being like the tool, like the entry point, right, for like everything. But then, you go through what you went through. You were carnivore 10 years ago. Now you're watching people like get all excited about it. You're like, oh yeah, I've been there.
Done that.
So I'll see you in a few years when you're vegan.
When you're vegan, exactly. And then when you're, whatever, paleo or keto or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, so where can people follow you, keep up with what you're doing, putting out?
I mean, so I have my like deniseminger.com blog that I wrote something about the coronavirus, I think was my last post, or maybe China study. And I don't even remember. Like I've abandoned that blog for the most part. I go on there, I'm just like, it's all food stuff. So I might be starting another website that's going to be more oriented towards like psychedelics and like, a sane approach to everything that's there. If I do that, I'll post it like on social media, Facebook. I have a business page on Facebook. Look up Denise Minger on Twitter. If you go to my Twitter account, there are like some tweets I made like while on ayahuasca, like a while back. Piece it all together. Right. Yeah. And Instagram, Denise Minger. Like, I'm not very active at the moment on those places, but like I'm definitely feeling like a draw.
I didn't even know you had an Instagram. Okay, so you do have someone out there. Okay, cool. We'll be looking out for your face tattoo on Instagram when you post it.
It'll be a giant ayahuasca symbol.
Hey, the chemical molecules of it, right?
Yeah. No regrets.
Beautiful. No regrets. That's right. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for doing this. It was awesome.
Thank you so much for the platform too, just to be able to talk about this.
Anytime.
I really appreciate
your time.
End up owning me.